You may have seen in the Nonprofit Link newsletter that Capital Crossroads has launched an Events for Equity community calendar. And so I know that these are hyperlinked here. I will take a moment when maybe Bethany is getting started to make sure that I link that into the chat, since we don't have the opportunity to click on those hyperlinks in. Oh, here we go. I got it on the screen. So I'll pop that into the chat. Have a couple of other nonprofit and community resource opportunities coming up. So GDMLI, the Greater Des Moines Leadership Institute 2021 Community Connect applications are open. If anybody has been a participant in that, I've heard amazing things. A great opportunity, as you're looking to kind of build your leadership and bench strength within your organization, to think about who on your staff might be a good fit. We have the 8th Annual Inclusion Summit coming up, and I know that those of you who were participating in the Equity Challenge, which concluded, I think, this week, got a lot of information about the Inclusion Summit, but if you weren't participating, you're more than welcome to join that summit. And then if you have some office space needs, we have some Herman Miller, not we, but there's a partner who has some Herman Miller office workstations available. So let me know if you want me to connect you up on that. Those are intended for office use and not home use. So we will keep going. And I know Bethany Snyder, who is our presenter today, is really eager to learn who's here with us this morning. So if you want to share in the chat the name of your organization or anything like that, feel free to go ahead and do that. Always try and put a little image here on this slide. And, I was really thinking about that stress ball. I found this stress ball image, Statue of Liberty holding the stress ball, and it feels like maybe just how we've all been feeling and might continue to feel for the next couple of days or even weeks as the election results are still uncertain in some places. But we do have new lawmakers in Iowa. And so we will be learning a little bit from Bethany today about really what advocacy for the nonprofit sector can look like, and ways to lean into that space and kind of that connectivity with your members, your donors, your supporters, and stakeholders. And then in the main room, we'll also have Dave Stone from United Way of Central Iowa, sharing the legislative agenda that United Way has for this upcoming session. There'll be an opportunity for you to just stick around in the main room, or you can indicate later whether you'd want to go to a Q&A session with Bethany, or just kind of an open main room. So we're just really committed to holding space for the sector on these Wednesdays. So let's move to the next session. And Bethany, I'll invite you to start your video and your audio and give you a moment. Bethany is joining us from California today. She was letting me know that she is in a hotel. So I was like, your space, your office looks a lot like a hotel, but that's where you are. So taking advantage of kind of the opportunity to be on the road. And we look forward to that hearing your presentation today. So Bethany, I'll just invite you to kind of get started, and really appreciate you, yes, joining us very early California time today. So I'll let you kind of take it away, and let me know if when you're ready to move to the next slide, and Bridget will take care of that for us.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm so excited to be here. Just one second. Please get in my. All right. Hi, everyone. So again, thanks. I am so excited to be here this morning. I know it's really early for you as well. I wasn't supposed to be in California, but that's a whole nother story we can talk about later. So yes, so I've been doing advocacy. I refer to myself as a nonprofit advocacy expert. I've been doing advocacy strategies for the last 20 years, mainly in the healthcare arena, and also in some other. I currently work. I work with lots of different clients around the United States. But my expertise is in healthcare, housing and homelessness, and LGBTQ issues. So I always say that I've been on all sides of the advocacy desk. I've been a grassroots advocacy director. I was for the Heart Association. I was a lobbyist for Leading Age, so in senior services. So I see there's some folks today that work in the senior sector. I've been a consultant for the state of California on their healthcare programs. I was a United States Senate staffer on healthcare and senior issues for Senator Al Franken. And I'm a communication strategist. And I always say I refer to myself as an advocacy strategist, enthusiast, and optimist. And my favorite thing to do is to help organizations leverage their people so we can pass good policies. Okay, next slide. So before we talk about a little bit how to leverage these lawmakers, I think it's really important to talk a little bit about context right now. So what's going on? Okay, so we are obviously in the middle of a presidential election. We don't know who's going to win, but it really, I mean, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter when it comes to advocacy. It's about how do you build that strategy to help pass your policy. So what's going on? We have gridlock in DC. We know we'll probably continue to have gridlock in DC. There's more actions going on in the state. So we know that there's more opportunity to pass policies in Iowa. We know through a volatile electoral map, as well as we've had decreasing amount of tenure on Capitol Hills across the United States and in Washington, D.C. So there's lack of subject matter expertise and lack of institutional knowledge. So in the past, lawmakers and their staff would become really knowledgeable. They may be on the energy committee for 15 years or for 10 years, and they become really knowledgeable about those policies, or they'd be on the healthcare committees or education committees or the tax committee. And then also their staff would become really knowledgeable. We know that folks are leaving the Hill. The pay is dismal, the work hours are terrible. I can talk more about that, but so there's really a lack of subject matter expertise. And there's many big intertwined, complicated problems that we have and lots of solutions. So next slide. So how do nonprofits fit in? I really believe that we need to equip nonprofit organizations with the time, expertise, skills, and confidence to engage in the legislative arena and help solve our toughest problems. Nonprofit organizations are on the front lines of our most challenging issues. You guys see what's happening every day. Your staff has incredible knowledge, and we need to be able to connect your knowledge and expertise with those making the policy decisions. So that's what I try to work with organizations, is how do we connect your subject matter expertise with the people making these really incredible, important policy decisions so we can move in the right direction. Next slide. So just again, a little bit more context I'm going to jump through. So what's going on? These are trends. The Congressional Management Foundation puts out a survey every few years and interviews congressional staff. I think these also can relate to state staff. So what we know is that direct constituent interactions have more influence on lawmakers than any other advocacy strategy. We know that. As a congressional staffer, I can talk about that. Congress places a high value on relationships with the lawmaker and their staff. So the more that you can strengthen those connections between your members and donors and stakeholders and the Congression and the staff and the lawmaker, the more influence you can have. Citizen advocates are more influential when they provide personalized and local information to Congress. Again, when I was a Senate staffer, I always asked, how's this going to impact Minnesotans? What do people in Minnesota think about this? When you have that kind of information, that is going to be more useful. But I'll talk a little bit about how I don't want that to be intimidated and how that shouldn't stand in the way. So citizens have a significant potential to enhance their advocacy skills. So what this is talking about is there's a lot of training that can happen. We can better equip our members and donors and stakeholders to be better advocates and be more effective when they're talking to lawmakers. Okay, next. So what, this is not, I can just breathe through this because you guys know this. What is stopping nonprofits from engaging in advocacy? And you guys already know a lot of these common barriers. Next slide. So first of all, the number one thing I hear constantly when I talk to nonprofit organizations is, we're a nonprofit, we're a 501c3, we can't get involved in politics. And you guys, I know you guys are savvy. Advocacy and politics are very different, especially in the eyes of the IRS. Politics involves parties, candidates, and elections. And you even know that there's ways for 501c3s to be engaged in elections. We just had tons of voter education and outreach initiatives. But basically, if you stay away from parties, candidates, and elections and focus on your issue, nonprofits should be engaged in the legislative arena. Next slide. Yeah, so these are some of the things. Oh, we can't do advocacy. We're a C3. We don't want to get involved in that. Oh, another org does that. Our donors don't want to get involved in advocacy. Our mission is serving people. We really need to focus on fundraising right now. These are all the things that we hear. I have, I can talk about each of these, but I'm not going to. But mainly, what I want to think about when you start thinking about legislative advocacy is it's about bringing your expertise and your members and your stakeholders' expertise and passion to their lawmakers. Next slide, please. And another thing that sometimes I think organizations get tripped up in, and so is this mindset around advocacy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this in the next few slides, and then we'll get into how you can turn this into leveraging lawmakers. Is a lobbying strategy is focused on moving bills from one point to the next, right? So if I'm a lobbyist, I'm trying to get it from this committee to that committee to that committee. But when you're a grassroots strategist, which is what I talk about, or you're thinking about your grassroots strategy, this is about building power for your organization. And those are obviously two different mindsets that have to come together around a common goal, which is passing good policy. So when I think about legislative advocacy, I think about building power for your organization. How are you leveraging this moment to build power for your organization? And as we look at these new lawmakers, how are you going to leverage this moment? Next step. So why should your organization be engaged in advocacy? And like I've mentioned this, to strengthen your organization. Next slide. So I really encourage you and challenge you to think about advocacy as a member engagement tool. So obviously it's about passing good policy. It's about solving these really challenging, deep-seated societal issues that we have and problems. It's about housing the homeless, feeding the hungry, ensuring that everyone has adequate and affordable and quality health care. But it's also about how do you as a nonprofit how you as a nonprofit can use it as a member engagement tool. Next slide. So I can talk about each of these separately, but I'm not going to. Advocacy provides numerous benefits to an organization. There's cyclical opportunities, personal stories, more data, volunteer recognition opportunities, these little wins throughout the process, and then obviously visibility and credibility. You're sitting at these tables helping make these decisions, and you're going to get more visibility and credibility. Next slide, please.
Bethany, can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by little wins?
Oh, sure. So what I mean by little wins, and this is great because we have this next slide, and you guys know this, I know that you're savvy folks, but this is, the bill cycle. And each of these steps represent a place in which you can have a little win. And now this, of course, this is like when I think about passing a bill, from introduction to passage, the most straightforward path will have about 7 steps. Each of those steps represents an opportunity for you to say, we did this. It represents an opportunity for you to engage your members in the process, but then also to say, we are moving forward. We passed this committee hearing. We passed this floor vote, et cetera, et cetera. So there's lots of different kinds of little wins, even signing on to a coalition letter, which I'll talk about later. Next step. So this is something I think many nonprofits don't think about, is that advocacy really can shore up your fundraising and really has a fundraising impact. So people are 5 times more likely to open an advocacy message than a fundraising appeal. Next slide. And advocates, so I know it sounds common sense when I say this, but people who are advocates are 7 times more likely to donate to an organization than non-advocates. And it makes sense, right? They're already connected to your mission. They are already bought in. And so they're more likely to donate to your organization than a non-advocate is going to. So it's about how do you balance those two things and make sure that you're leveraging that. Okay, now what? Now we're getting to the meat and potatoes. So we have new lawmakers equal new opportunities. And I'd even say for the current lawmakers, that also offers new opportunities. So we're done with the election or no? We're just in the middle of this election. We're going to know who these new lawmakers are, who the current, the current lawmakers are going to be in a few days. And so what can we leverage at this moment? Excitement from the election, which you're thinking, how is there excitement? We are tired of it. We don't want to do this anymore. How can there be excitement? We have fatigue. Well, you can build excitement, and you can talk about how this is a new chapter. We have a new legislative session starting in January or this winter, and talk about this is a new chapter for us to move forward. There's new relationships, obviously, and with new relationships, so there's the new lawmakers, the freshman lawmakers that don't that are brand new. We have less baggage. So I'm just going to quickly tell the story. When I was a Senate staffer, I didn't even cover education, but my partner worked at a for-profit university, which we can talk about that later. But this is before they were really on the hot seat, and no one was really talking about this. Is the beginning of the Obama administration. And so I reached out to their GR, even though I was healthcare, that's education. I was like, well, we have a personal connection with these folks. So I reached out to the government relations and I said, hey, Senator Franken, he served on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. I was like, hey, and this was a organization that was headquartered in Minneapolis. Love to meet you. We don't know much about Capella University. Oh, I shouldn't say their name, but anyway. And they really were hesitant. He was a Democrat. They didn't think that he would like them. I don't know, really, honestly, what was going through, but they never responded to my request to meet with them, which just also blows my mind. I can talk about more about that later. But then all of a sudden, all these regulations and hearings started happening around for-profit universities, and all of a sudden they wanted to have a meeting with Senator Franken. Now, by this time, he's already has more information. His mind is almost already made up about how he feels about this issue, and they could have had a really fresh, open relationship with him had they just leveraged that moment and started on neutral ground. Now they're in the middle of a political battle, competing, influences, etc. But also I want to say this is an awesome time to build an education for your advocates and donors and for your lawmakers. So like Dave's going to talk about the legislative agenda. How are you sharing that legislative? Are you training your folks on it? Are you making sure that your key people know they're on key, their lawmakers serve on key committees? And then obviously there's build-in education for the lawmakers, which I'll talk to about in a minute. Next slide. All right. Also, many times it's also a great opportunity to evaluate who are your built-in advocates. So we're going to talk about leveraging those lawmakers, but we need to figure out who's going to leverage them. Who are we going to make sure are contacting them? And these are your built-in advocates. So many nonprofits are like, we don't have a grassroots network, or we don't do legislative advocacy, or who would contact their lawmakers? Well, you already have these people without doing any other kind of outreach. You have staff, which I know that's tricky, but we can talk about that. But I really think that many nonprofits do not leverage their staff as key advocates. These are people who are on the front lines, who are serving people directly, who have those personal relationships with constituents and have those personal stories and are already really committed to your mission. Obviously, if your board of directors, they are committed to your mission, but they also are usually leaders in the community, already have great relationships in the community, may already have these relationships with lawmakers that you may or may not be leveraging. And then obviously donors. A lot of people say, well, my donors don't want to be involved in legislative advocacy. And, that may or may not be true, but I will say, I think what I hear, I should get this number right. I usually have a 2016 number, $5 billion were spent on the election. Some of your donors gave to the election. I can guarantee it. So don't count them out. Next slide. So first, we need to think about as what's great about having the election in November, but people aren't sworn in until January typically, is that we have opportunities to plan and think about creating these connection opportunities. So first, research these new lawmakers. And there's also going to be lawmakers that they're going to be doing new committee assignments. So who's on the new committees? You know, this is what your lobbyist would do or your GR person. But then think about, are you telling people that their lawmakers are on these committees? So I always encourage my healthcare clients, are you contacting those folks and saying that your lawmaker serves on the health committee? We're going to be contacting you a lot. You are incredibly important. We want to make sure that you know what our legislative agenda is and how, you know, and how you can contribute to this process. So research the new committees, key positions, obviously, key locations. So I think this, you know, obviously against all geographical, but many times organizations will like tell me, well, we're just only in Des Moines. We wish we had, you know, statewide. Or other organizations are like, we're statewide. I wish we were just focused in Des Moines. You know, think about where in your geographic area, what are those key locations that you can leverage? And then also key professions. So these new lawmakers are going to be coming from different professions. They may already have a subject matter expertise that then you can tap into and say, hey, we know that you used to be a teacher, or we know that you used to be, you know, a financial advisor, or whatever it may be, and leverage that opportunity. Already tap into their existing knowledge. So then obviously you need to identify key contacts who are going to be reaching out to these people. I could talk about data all day long. And I know it's a barrier for nonprofits, but if you are not using an advocacy tool and tracking your advocacy, this is going to be very challenging. But you can see who are our key advocates. Do we have key advocates in these areas? Match your board members against obviously their legislative districts. This is common sense. And then your key stakeholders. And think, who do we need? And then see where do you have holes? Oh my gosh, we have the chair of the health committee. We have no advocates there, or we have no key contacts. How do we build that bench? So we make sure we can't have the chair of the health committee not being talked to if we are the Mid-Iowa Health Foundation. Oh,
Bethany, real
yeah.
quick, I have I just pop up with questions now and again.
Yeah.
When you're talking about tools and kind of how that's so important for nonprofit organizations and tracking this information, is this something that, you know, can go into the same kind of CRM that you're using for, you know, donor tracking, or what do you have any examples there?
Yeah, so there are a ton of advocacy software on the market, and I work with my clients to determine what is the best one to use for them. And a lot of them will integrate with your CRM, so you can really match how much is this donor taking action, and how much is this advocate giving to us. So there are those solutions. Like I said, there are tons of them on the market now. Many of them are not very expensive. And then there's also organizations that kind of piece it together with Excel spreadsheets. But I really feel strongly, I feel strongly about data already. Like, how can we make improvements if we're not tracking things, like in general? So I really think if an organization is going to be serious about grassroots advocacy, they might want to invest in a system. Oh yeah, and someone just said what a CRM is. Yeah, so that's like your database for your donors.
Thank you.
So you want to identify your needs. Training and materials. Do your advocates know how to talk to their legislators? They know who their legislators is? Do they know, and they know who legislators are? Do they know your key talking points? And then, but I want to quickly say though, that I don't want organizations to get really tripped up in thinking like that their advocates need to or their donors, their stakeholders or members need to have all the talking points. It's really about connecting their personal story. And I have a whole other webinar on that, but it's about how do you connect their personal story. Like when I was a staffer, I didn't expect a advocate to come in and be able to tell me like all the statistics around healthcare and how many, kids needed pediatric dentistry. No, I knew there's a lobbyist I could contact. But what my boss heard and what I heard were those stories. Senator Franken, we would meet with child mental health advocates. And there's this awesome program that connects community-based children's mental health services in the schools. And I remember this mother just saying, like, this was life-saving to us. My kid had never been able to have access to these critical mental health services, and now they're thriving in school. I can't tell you the stats on that, but I still remember that story, and Senator Franken remember that story and used it as on a floor speech. And we used it in our communication around why children's mental health is so important. So it's really about connecting those stories. And I'll tell one more story at the end. But then also think about continuing that engagement. I think sometimes organizations I had this one client who didn't understand, they were huge, they had tons of members, didn't understand why people were not taking action, why they couldn't get them to contact their lawmakers. And as I did more research on them and developed a plan for them, they were only dropping in during the legislative session. So during, May through December, they were saying nothing to their advocates. And then I know they're like, what would I say? Well, there's tons of things to do on the off season. So you can do that training, etc. But just people aren't as tied included as you. And so just dropping in randomly, like, sorry, Brianna's doing this presentation, which is fine, just does not serve your advocates well and does not set you up well for the legislative session in January. So during this fall, hopefully you've been talking to your advocates a lot or been engaging them and building your legislative agenda, et cetera. Okay. So yeah, plan your activities. So these really can be focused on donors or lawmakers. So those phone introductions, are you connecting those new lawmakers and their staff with your people? Doing legislative briefings. So one of my favorite things when I was a Senate staffer, and only a few orgs do this, and I don't know why, is once a year they'd have a legislative briefing just for staff. So me and the other congressional staff would go to their legislative briefings and they tell us what they're working on. And it was awesome. I got to hear what the other legislative staff were thinking about, which was great for me. But they could just tell us all at one time. We could ask questions and it was great. And you can also do legislative briefings for your key advocates so they can ask questions. So think about that. Policy previews, what Dave is going to be doing, like what's on the horizon. And then site visits or virtual tours. Right now, we're not really doing site visits, but you should be encouraging your members, donors, or you should just be inviting your lawmakers to a virtual tour. Just tell them what's up. Tell them about yourself. It doesn't need to be around a certain bill or legislation. And as I say, there are staff who just sit and I say it facetiously. I just wait at my phone for people to call and, invite me to do tours. I always say that as a Senate staffer. I mean, I was very busy, but but the best part of my job was getting out there and doing site visits. Last, I just want to think we've touched on this a little bit, but we've talked a little bit about digital, not too much, but using an advocacy software. You grow your base through digital, you engage through deeper connections, and then you develop those grass tops and key contacts that can really have those deep relationships with their lawmakers. Just try to show you how. Next slide. So I just want to give one example. This is my last slide, last bit of information. I feel like I've just been talking a mile a minute, so sorry about that. But I want to give an example from when I attended the United Way legislative breakfast in February. Seems like zillions of years ago, probably the last lobby day that was held in the Capitol, maybe. And it was so great. So I live in Urbandale with my family, and I just moved back to Iowa after I hadn't lived here in 22 years. We can talk about that later. And so I didn't really know. And I grew up in Altoona. So I know the part of town I live in didn't even exist when I was a kid. And so I went to their legislative breakfast, and one of the issues I'm really connected to personally is children's mental health issues. So I met with my state senator, or maybe it was my state representative, I should probably remember. And we were talking about United Way's legislative agenda and some key issues, and we got through those. And at the end, I said, really, thank you for developing. I just thanked him for working with the state legislature to develop a children's mental health system the year earlier. And then this year we were talking about funding it, which we know a lot of those things went to the wayside. But I just said to him, I have a child with mental health issues, and it is such a struggle to find care. And I'm an educated person who has resources, who's connected to the healthcare system, and still it was a struggle for me. And I asked him, I was like, I knew he had 2 kids because we just talked about that. I said, have you ever had to do that? And he actually said, yes, one of my kids has autism. And it has been a struggle. And the two United Way lobbyists flanking me had never heard that before. It was just a really sweet moment between me and this lawmaker where we could really connect on that personal level. And now those lobbyists know he has a personal connection to this issue. And so they can, I'm not going to say like use that, but they can then think about that as they're talking to him about this issue. And it's a really sweet moment between us. And it was just something that was unexpected and that a lobbyist can't do. So that's how you can really leverage those citizen voices and your members and advocates and donors. All right. So I'm going to just end on this last.
Yeah, of course. I just wanted to say I love that story. Thanks.
Oh,
and
thank you.
Thank you too.
So when I wake up every morning, this is the thing that gets me through the day and that will get me through the next few days, is that never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And just that keeps me grounded each day when I do this work. And last is just a slide that shows how you can connect with me if you want to. I love talking about advocacy. I will set up a free 45-minute call with anyone. I want to make sure that nonprofits have the skills that they need so we can pass good policy. That's
Great.
it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethany. I so enjoyed our conversation. I think it was probably January of last year when we met and got to know each other a little bit. I always love a fellow BS initialed person. So connecting on that.
You can't use my tagline. No,
and so, yeah, I really appreciate kind of ending on that story with United Way, because I think that's a really good opportunity also to call in Dave and, maybe transition in this space, the conversation into, what is that agenda looking like this year? But I'm going to give a pause because we're going to invite folks to select their breakout room. And so if you wouldn't mind, folks who are on the call, if you want to stay in the main room, you don't have to do anything. If you'd like to connect and have more of like a little Q&A, oh, Bobby Seguras says, love the BS initials also. If you want to have a Q&A with Bethany and dive a little bit deeper in some of these concepts, if you would indicate 1 in front of your name. And if you would like to just connect and share space with other people in the sector, kind of in a more open discussion, you could indicate a 2 in front of your name. So Bethany, I know, we were talking about our topic for today, and knowing 8:30 on November 4th was maybe going to be a time when not everybody felt like being on camera. So I think, we plan accordingly. And then I'm looking to see if we don't have anybody, we have a couple, at least one person who wants to be in a Q&A with you. So we'll just move folks into breakout rooms. And then, they might be a little bit small this time, but I'm going to do that. And let's see, give folks another couple of minutes to indicate.
I'm lots of fun. No, I feel like I have to sell myself on the breakout room.
I'm sorry. No, it is fine. A smaller group than we normally have today.
No, that is not a problem.
Kind of anticipated that. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms, and then I'm going to call in Dave. I think Dave, is your video on? And I did have to put a couple people's video and audio on mute. So hopefully that wasn't any of you as I zoom you out. I'm going to open the rooms. If you're staying in the main room, if you could keep your video and audio off. We'll just start zooming folks out. I'm going to open that. Okay. All right. I've got somebody maybe who just indicated they were interested. So let me make sure. There we go.
And then the chat, there's also.
There's a chat. I think I got the
Kaya English. Yeah.
Yeah, I got that covered. So, all right, go ahead and join. I think Bethany, you have a couple people who we're going to connect with you. And then let's just kind of segue into United Way. So Dave, I don't know if you have any slides that you wanted to share. If you have the opportunity to share your screen, would you be interested in slides?
Yes, if I could share my screen at some point, that'd be great.
Okay, let's give you the ability to do that. I think I have to do it over here. I'm sorry. It's it's a little discombobulated this morning on my part. Okay, I'm gonna give you the co-host privileges. Yes. Okay, go ahead and get started sharing if you can do that. Perfect.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can see my slides. Is that correct?
Yes, we
Okay.
gotcha.
Great. Well, my name's Dave Stone. I'm the Advocacy Officer for United Way of Central Iowa. And as Bethany mentioned, I'm one of those lobbyists that works at the Capitol. And I wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of review what United Way of Central Iowa will be advocating for in the 2021 legislative session here in Iowa. Obviously, we are still kind of taking a look at what the results of yesterday were. It does look like the Republican majority has advanced in the Iowa House, and so it does seem as if both chambers in the governor's office will be retained into Republican majority. So we're going to be spending our time today and in the next couple of weeks refining our strategies of how to best advance some of these public policy planks given that environment. I'm just going to dip right in. As you may know, United Way focuses on education, income or financial stability, health, and essential needs. And so in our education area, really what we're looking for is equitable education opportunities in both a virtual and in-person learning environment. Obviously, COVID has really changed the paradigm in terms of educational opportunities. This is specifically focused at pre-K through 12, but really in our new kind of environment, all of us are remotely working. Adult learners are using the internet to go back to school. There are folks getting training programs and short-term credentials and certificates through virtual models as well. So we're really focusing on that. Another little area would be expansion of the child care development tax credits. That's a state-based thing that allows folks to afford the cost of child care or dependent care if needed. Income is where we have a lot of the bulk of our work in this coming session. Many of you may be aware that we host the Iowa Skills to Compete Coalition, a coalition of nonprofits, government, business, workforce providers that really focus on skills building. We have a lot of jobs available in the state of Iowa. We have a lot of folks who are looking for work or are underemployed, but there is a skills mismatch. And so if we can get some folks those 2-year, 4-year degrees, training programs, apprenticeships into the trades, we can help folks have a living stable wage. Our chief plank always in income and in our Skills to Compete Coalition is the child care cliff effect. Many of you've heard United Way talk about that for many years now. We had some movement last year in terms of making the cliff effect smoother, but there is still a donut in eligibility in that program that we will be working on and addressing. There are still lots of things to do in terms of childcare, and with some of the stimulus money coming from the federal level, there are some opportunities for us to be able to advance and expand the program finally once and for all. New for us is equitable access to broadband. This has been an item that has maybe made it to our agenda and in the final cuts always gets cut. Now with COVID, and as I mentioned, the distance learning and distance working, also with the impacts of the derecho and the infrastructure rebuild that we're going to have to be doing in this state, we really wanted to focus on equitable broadband access. And so some of this is going to be policy, some of this is going to be good old-fashioned partnerships, because even here in Des Moines, there are plenty of places that have pockets, dead zones, if you will. And also in our more vulnerable populations, the equipment cost, ongoing monthly cost to have a quality internet connection can be a barrier as well. We will be supporting efforts from the Governor's Focus Committee on returning citizens, so folks that have previously been incarcerated and are coming back to our communities. We've been working in the reentry space for a number of years now, and that Focus Committee report that has come out has been pretty good. Some pretty nice manageable bites that we can work on in helping making returning citizens transition back to the community easier. And then, of course, adult basic education, gap and PACE programs. The Iowa Skilled Worker Fund has been funded at $12.5 million for my tenure at United Way, and we hope to maintain those funds. And again, Future Ready Iowa is sort of in line with some of these goals as well. One program that we've been working on pretty extensively in the past 2 years is the SNAP Employment and Training Program. This is a federal program related to the food assistance or food stamp program. And SNAP ENT in our state has been woefully underused. Less than 400 people were on it last year. In many other states, tens of thousands of SNAP participants are included in this program. And what it means, and we just had some movement here in July, we were able to get nonprofits included into the program. So in short, what the program is if an individual is using SNAP benefits or is eligible for SNAP benefits, and a nonprofit, a state entity, agency, a community college provides them education or training and advancement of them getting a better paying position, thus reducing the need for that assistance, any nonprofit or state-based entity or community college can receive a reimbursement from the federal U.S. Department of Agriculture, 50 cents on the dollar. So whatever you spend on that individual can be reimbursed, thus allowing capacity to build. Great program. We've been working on trying to build it out and scale it to the statewide level. In health, as you recall, we've been working on children's mental health for a number of years now. I just want to remind everyone that during last year's unprecedented short truncated session that no action was taken in terms of funding the mental health system here in Iowa. And so our Coalition to Advance Mental Health in Iowa for Kids, or CAMI for Kids, has been meeting. We are coming together around a series of recommendations to be able to put to the legislature about how to fund this system. Sorry, I'm getting a chat. Oops. Now I'm all okay. And then oral health. This is an area that we've been working on kind of quietly in the past few years, but oral health, dental care, if you will, has been something that has been a gap for many vulnerable populations, and it impacts overall health. A great example would be a student, a kiddo who has a cavity that goes untreated. They're not able to focus in the classroom. That cavity may become an abscess and a more serious medical condition, and there's costs involved. You know, if we could have just fixed that $75 cavity in the beginning, that kiddo would be still in the classroom, still be learning, instead of presenting at the ER with a much more serious condition that at the end of the day, Medicaid and other indigent care programs might have to cover. So the importance of oral health is really key. Well Kids of Central Iowa and the ACEs committees, those are really focused on wellness for children, and we are going to be focusing there as well.
Dave, I'm going to pop in the chat on Iowa ACEs. There's a November 9th, there's a Central Iowa Advocacy event happening on Zoom. So I'll make sure folks have the link to that in the chat as well.
Mm-hmm. Under essential needs, our 211 service, the resource referral service that you can call, text, use on the web 24/7, that has been the state's COVID-19 official hotline since the beginning of the pandemic in March, and has served in capacities of disaster recovery, both last year during flooding and as this year during derecho. And we will be seeking an appropriation this year to help support that service in all 99 counties. We've had to scale it up and build out infrastructure, especially staff and technology, in order to keep up with the demand that the state has had. Related to COVID-19 recovery, we're really looking at focusing on the nonprofit sector. We did a lot of advocacy over the summer, which led to the IEDA nonprofit recovery grants using CARES Act funding. We want to continue to do that, so if there's opportunities to enhance the nonprofit sector during this session, we will continue to do that. Sales tax exemption for food banks and pantries, we got it almost through last year. It passed the House. It did not pass the Senate in the final hours. But as Bethany had mentioned, small victories. We made it through a whole chamber this past year in the 3 years that we've been working on. So that's halfway to the goal, plus a governor's signature who we believe we have. So we're just going to be focusing on the Senate this next year to try and get that policy through. We've had a lot of good work on farm to food tax credit, which is really not legislative. It's really a kind of an agency director level advocacy, and we'll be expanding that as well. And then any sort of appropriations to the food insecurity safety net system, including the Double Up Food Bucks program of the Iowa Healthiest State Initiative, plus direct appropriations for food. So that's kind of an overview of the United Way agenda for this coming session. And I just wanted to kind of stop there and see if people had questions, thoughts, comments. I'll leave it to the group.
Sure. And I'll welcome anybody to come off of mute or put your video on or put something in the chat. But Dave, I know when we talked about advocacy last, it was, I think, in the beginning of August when we were thinking about return to learn and different opportunities there. And you were talking about, and Bethany talked today about, the importance of these stories and kind of how the nonprofit community, can engage and how powerful those kind of personal connections are. So, what's most effective in organizations working with you? Do you have any other kind of stories like the one that Bethany shared around, being able to lift up some nonprofit expertise and voice on issues?
Sure, absolutely. It's hard right now in a pandemic environment, but one of the best techniques and strategies during the interim. Now we're in the middle of this election. It's going to be over here, but we're still going to be in the interim. Interim meaning that January we haven't signed into session yet, if you will. During interim, which typically is May to end of December, a great opportunity for you is to invite your local legislators to your facility, to a program, for a tour. It establishes that relationship first off. It shows them what you're doing. If you have clients, patients, what have you, in person, that might give them an opportunity to talk to some folks on the ground. Now, in a pandemic environment, if you don't feel comfortable with that, you can't do that. There are also opportunities to do sort of these one-on-one meetings virtually. Schedule a time with your local legislator and, just have that one-on-one interaction, even through a virtual model, in order to explain the program that you're doing, what it does. If in those cases, if you can have someone who can provide that testimonial in those virtual visits, that would be even better. So that's one of those great tactics. It establishes the relationship so that if you do show up in January or February at the session, oh, hey, I already knew you. You run that program that I took a tour of back in October. It's a really great conversation starter, and it makes them remember you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Well, I am going to kind of close out the breakout rooms. It looks like our general group came back to us, and everybody who's joining us today, thank you for your presence. I'm sure, Dave, you were probably up pretty late last night as well, just kind of watching the returns and so appreciate that. I'm going to bring in the folks from the breakout room 1 who were chatting with Bethany. And then if we can go to the next slide also, that'll be great. And I'll share a little bit of this. Once they come back, it's they have about a minute left. So we have here on the screen just the topics for our upcoming community circles. And I'll ask maybe during this time when we're waiting for the rest of the folks to join us, are there topics that you haven't been seeing that you are hungry for? What have you most appreciated about this time? I think, we've sent out a couple of surveys, but haven't had a ton of participation in that. So I just really want to be designing opportunities and highlighting topics that are, relevant and timely and engaging. And so if you have ideas that you'd like to pop into the chat, just know I'm very open to hearing those, and we'll do our best to program accordingly. We thought today might be a day where people were looking for sort of what's next and kind of action around advocacy. So great. Well, our next topic, and it looks like we're just really going to have to pull that breakout room 1 back because I don't really want to close out without them. So we'll give them, they've got like 5 seconds before they get booted back over to us. And then we'll close it out for today, maybe even a couple minutes early, just knowing. All right, so I think we should have the breakout room 1 folks back. Hopefully it was a small but mighty conversation. So looking ahead, we are going to be inviting 2 nonprofit leaders who are going to talk with us during our next community circle time about how they've been navigating a merger and kind of what that's looked like, a case study kind of approach and really kind of a Q&A. So I know we did some talk couple months ago before we launched our strategic collaboration grants around the power of possibility and kind of what different kinds of strategic alignments look like. So it was really powerful to hear at that point from Tim Shanahan, who told the story about Hawthorne Hill and Bidwell Riverside coming together. And now we have two other nonprofit leaders who are both founders, who have made the decision to merge their organizations. And I'm not sharing the organizations quite yet. Their public launch won't really be till January. So, this is one of those great, trusting kind of peer network spaces where they can sort of talk about that while it's in process. And then on December 2nd, we are going to be leveraging technology for remote collaboration. We'll host DSM Hack. For those who are familiar, the hack was canceled this year because of COVID, and I don't think that they're anticipating being able to do a 2021 hack, because that's, I think, in the first part of the year. So looking for different ways to partner, and we thought, this hybrid and kind of remote environment isn't going away. How can we talk with our friends who have some technology expertise about how to do that even better and really build collaboration? And then from our last session with our executive roundtables, there were a lot of conversations around workforce, around kind of sector strength, some of the advocacy conversations. And so in that session, we'll also be inviting folks who are working on an Iowa Nonprofit Alliance. They've been working on this for a couple years. You may have heard updates at the Iowa Nonprofit Summit last year, the year before. It's all, who knows. But they have kind of reached a concept paper point, and so they will be presenting that concept as one of the breakouts in the main room on December 2nd as well. And I did want to call out also in the chat from our conversation with Dave that there is an Iowa ACES 360 event around advocacy. So if you are involved kind of in those topics, feel free to add some information. I'm sorry, feel free to access that link in the chat. So again, Jack, thanks for your note. I'm going to repost it because I think folks who were in the breakouts didn't get it. So putting it in there, check that out. Another opportunity to kind of lean into advocacy together. So I know we're ending just a couple minutes early today, but I really, really want to extend my appreciation to Bethany, who came to us from California, even though she's now based in Central Iowa. So appreciate your willingness to share space with us this morning and your expertise, and connect with some of our nonprofit leaders. And then also to Dave and United Way for really kind of galvanizing the community around these important advocacy issues. And I'll just encourage you all to, continue to use your voice. I attended an event this past weekend that Iowa Coalition for Collective Change, our friend Luana, who's presented at Community Circles, put on, and Deidre DeGier spoke, and of course, Deidre is always so beautiful to hear speak. She was talking about how, all of our elected officials are imperfect people, and what makes them whole and what makes this process whole is us adding our voices. And so I've just really been carrying those words and thoughts with me over the past couple of days since she spoke them, and just invite you to find a way to sort of plug in on these important issues that really deeply impact our work and our community. So thanks for spending time with us today. I will leave the session open if anybody wants to pop any thoughts in the chat or ideas for future sessions, and we'll look forward to seeing you on November 18th. Thanks so much, everybody.